Okay, so now we get into the most important part of section 2, which has to do with hypothetical and categorical imperatives and more clarification about what the categorical imperative itself is like. So Kant begins this discussion, which comes relatively soon after the passage discussed in the previous video lecture, at the end of the previous video lecture. He begins this discussion as follows. He says, the conception of an objective principle, insofar as it is obligatory for a will, is called a command of reason, and the formula of the command is called an imperative. Okay, so again, what we have in mind here is the practical law, and we're trying to make sense of what that practical law is like, and then we also have subjective principles or maxims. Okay, so this objective principle, any kind of thing that would be a candidate for an objective principle or the practical law is going to have the form of an imperative, Kant says, a command. So you may remember from English grammar or any kind of grammar that there are different kinds of sentences, right? So there are declarative sentences which say how things are. They just make a claim about the way things are. There are interrogative sentences that ask questions, and there are imperative sentences that say that someone or that command someone, that say do this, do that, right? So open the door is an example of an imperative sentence. And so that's basically what Kant means here, though he's going to express these imperative sentences as sentences that include words like ought or should, that say what someone ought or should do. They probably could be re-expressed as imperatives, as direct commands, do X or don't do X. But for the rest of this presentation, I'll follow Kant's own discussion in just basically treating any sentence that includes the words should or ought as an imperative, and likewise treat imperatives as sentences that include those words. And then Kant says another extremely bold thing. He says all imperatives command either hypothetically or categorically. So what he's saying is, of all of the commands that could apply to our will, that is, all of the laws or objective principles that apply to us, that provide some reason as to why we should act one way or another, that all those imperatives command either hypothetically or categorically. And now he's going to tell us about what the distinction between those two things is. So he says the former, that is, hypothetical imperatives, represent the practical necessity of a possible action as a means to something else that is willed, or which one might possibly will. The categorical imperative, on the other hand, will be that which represented an action as necessary of itself without reference to another end, that is, as objectively necessary. So let's start with hypothetical imperatives and see if I can give you some more clarity about what those are. So hypothetical imperatives command only hypothetically, that is, under some condition. They are always expressed in the form, or can be expressed in the form, if one wants X, one should do Y. So here's an example. If you want to live a long and healthy life, you should not smoke cigarettes, because it's well known, it's well documented that cigarettes reduce the number of years that we live on average. They hurt our health and they lead to shorter lifespan overall for regular smokers. So we should not smoke if we want to live a long and healthy life. You could say, to be more precise, if you want to live a long and healthy life, you shouldn't smoke regularly, like you shouldn't smoke a pack of cigarettes a week or 10 cigarettes a week. I don't know what the exact number is. But probably you shouldn't smoke at all, right? Because even if you just smoke like one cigarette a week or one cigarette a month, you don't know which of those cigarettes might cause cancer, might cause other health problems. And so it's probably better overall for your health not to smoke at all. So let's just take it as a principle or as a hypothetical imperative that if you want to live a long and healthy life, you should not smoke. Now, there's a feature of hypothetical imperatives that it's very important to recognize, namely their hypothetical character. They only apply, or let me put it more precisely, the ought statement, the imperative part of the statement, the part of the statement that says one should do X or one should do Y. In this example, that's one should quit smoking. Okay, so that should part of the imperative, that should part of the hypothetical imperative, it only applies if the condition in the first part of the hypothetical imperative also applies. Okay, so take the example of two smokers. Okay, so you see your friend outside and they're smoking a cigarette, and you're surprised because you thought they didn't smoke. You, in fact, thought they were very health conscious. They've told you many times that the most important thing to them is to live a long and healthy life, or at least that it's a very important thing to them. And so they've told you they want to live a long and healthy life. You believe them, and now you see them smoking a cigarette. So you ask them, "What's going on? I didn't know you smoked. Is this? I mean, how does this fit in your healthy lifestyle? It seems like it wouldn't." And your friend says, "Yeah, I know it's a bad habit. I really ought to stop." Okay. Well, there what's happening is your friend is recognizing that there is this imperative that applies to them because they do in fact want to live a long and healthy life. And the fact that they're smoking, they know that their smoking is getting in the way of that, or that it doesn't that it's not the best means to that. And so they're recognizing that there is this imperative that applies to their will and that they're not meeting. Okay, and in this case, we can say that that's a case of a will that is not good in a certain respect because that will is not meeting the standard of what rationality requires for this person. Notice that it's not good, it's being not good is not exactly not a moral good. So it's not that the person who's smoking the cigarette is immoral, but it is that their will is not good in a certain respect. Okay, and that'll be important for how that's important for understanding how and why Kant describes failing to meet some imperative as a matter of a will not being good in some respect. Imperatives are imperatives that imperatives tell us what is required in order for our will to be fully good. Okay, and hypothetical imperatives apply to us only under the condition of the if part of the hypothetical imperative, the hypothetical part applying to us. So your friend who wants to live a long and healthy life, the hypothetical imperative applies to them, and so they recognize that they should stop smoking. But now let me give you the second part of this, okay? So imagine that, another example, imagine that you see someone smoking a cigarette and you say, hey, why are you doing that? You know, if you want to live a long and healthy life, that's a bad thing to do. It's a bad idea. And the person says, oh yeah, I know that if I want to live a long and healthy life, I should quit, you know, and then they take another drag of their cigarette or they light up a second cigarette, you know, yeah, I know if I want to live a long and healthy life, I should give up smoking. You say, well, then why are you smoking? And they say, I don't care about living a long and healthy life. You know, I want to live fast and die young. I'm punk rock. I mean, I plan to die by the age of 35. I drive fast in cars. I smoke. I do drugs. I don't care, you know. And this person is one to whom the hypothetical imperative that if you want to live a long and healthy life, you should quit smoking doesn't apply because they actually don't want to live a long and healthy life. And so that's the thing about hypothetical imperatives. They only apply to people if the person actually wants the thing that's part of the hypothetical part, the if part, okay? And so then Kant goes on to say, and this is really the kind of main point of his discussion of hypothetical imperatives, that moral imperatives cannot be hypothetical because if they were, then they would be contingent on whatever it is that an individual person wants. But they're not like that, at least according to the common sense idea of morality and of duty that Kant has begun with. and I think a lot of us today would agree, that if morality is anything at all, it can't just be a matter of whatever it is that people want. It can't just be contingent on what people want. It needs to be something more objective than that. If there is such a thing as morality, Kant thinks, it can't be a hypothetical imperative. It has to be a categorical imperative. And this is the other main kind of imperative that he says is possible. So a categorical imperative is one that always applies. Think about the way that the word categorical is used sometimes to mean if somebody says it applies categorically, or somebody says that is categorically true or categorically not true. They mean something like it's true by definition, or it's true always. So for instance, if I said dogs are categorically mammals, or it's categorically true that dogs are mammals, what that means is that nothing can be a dog unless it's a mammal. Okay, so if somebody said, I got a new pet, it's a pet dog, but it's not a mammal, they must be using the word dog in some other way that's not the usual English language way, because dogs, at least as a biological category, are categorically mammals. So the categorical imperative will be like that, in that it will categorically apply. It will apply always, regardless of the circumstances.